My friends, speedrunning has seen its fair share of unusual, curious, and otherwise controversial moments. Today we're going to share 3 stories from 3 distinct games of these curious and unusual speedruns and speedrun moments, with a couple of the stories taking place deeper in the halls of speedrun history from more than 10 years ago, and the other is an update on a more recent speedrun incident. So join me by the fireside, get cozy, and enjoy.
Here we go.
And my friends, what a pleasure it is to be here by the fireside on a cold winter's night in the glow of a lovely Christmas tree just off screen. And I thought I would share these unusual stories from speedruns past. Now today I'm going to talk about my 3 favorite or most iconic N64 games. So there's one story from Super Mario 64, one from Ocarina of Time, and then an update on a controversial GoldenEye speedrunning incident in recent times. But let's start with the Super Mario 64 one, shall we? Now this story takes us back to August 2013, although the rumblings and pre-story, of course, take place before then. Because, Super Mario 64, to this very day, remains one of the most iconic speed games out there. Probably the most iconic, the most competed, and thus the most storied. And I vividly remember, hearing rumblings of Mario speedruns, throughout time, dating to the early 2000s. And it really picked up in late 2012, when, of course, Siglemic would come to Twitch and speedrun his attempts of 120 star, the full game category. It's almost impossible to describe what this was like, seeing these speedrun attempts, in person or live on stream at the time. It would be like trying to describe someone what it would be like watching Tiger Woods play golf in the early 2000s, or what it would have been like to watch the Muhammad Ali fights live on television back in the 60s and 70s, It was really that remarkable and really that significant for the history of speedrunning Super Mario 64. And Siglemic truly became this icon, before his time, exchanging world records from about 1 hour 47 minutes, down to this unbelievably iconic 1:44:01 in that time frame, late 2012 into 2013. And he wanted desperately to get 143. It was sort of his ultimate goal. He especially streamed a lot in August 2012. It was truly remarkable, 12 plus hours a day, got it down to 1:44:01, and wanted to keep going and just couldn't quite nab that 143. Now, this was really the sort of early fundamental rumbling days of wider organized speedrunning. It had existed in pockets, game by game, community by community, these very niche parts of the internet. But this was the first time, thanks to Twitch, and of course Speedruns Live, another website founded by some speedrun enthusiasts, where things felt more and more kind of connected and united, although not as much as they would become later on. And so everyone was cheering for Siglemic. He was a widely beloved figure, quite frankly, and people wanted to see this new world record happen of 143. But another thing to keep in mind was that Siglemic and most of the other players playing at the time, who were mostly Japanese speedrunners, all played on the Nintendo 64 console, and they were very, very pure in keeping it N64 console only, specifically not including the virtual console versions of the game. At the time you could play Nintendo 64 games on the Wii, on the virtual console, and in fact, these games generally played a little bit faster, a little bit less laggier than the true original N64 versions. And so you could kind of save time for free in a lot of these versions of the game. Now, this is something that kind of each community decides, and we'll find out later the Ocarina of Time community decided otherwise. It's something, thankfully, we never had to deal with in GoldenEye because there was not a virtual console release of GoldenEye at the time, due to all these rights and stuff that were up in the air. But SM64 was N64 only, even though one could easily get a better time playing on Virtual Console. One night in August 2013, along comes a fella by the name Hayasun27, and he is indeed playing Virtual Console. Now you have to also understand that there was not really any leaderboards at the time. It was a very vague sort of system of like, what's the world record? And in a lot of games, nobody even knew. There was no centralized place to keep track of this. So it made it kind of difficult and controversial to figure out who had each world record in each game, and you kind of just had to like know somebody or know what the record was, which was kind of interesting. And look, just because the Mario players chose to play on N64 does not mean that it was illegal to play on Virtual Console or an emulator version of the game. It's not like some kind of speedrun police were going to break into your house and arrest you for doing so. And so Hayasin kind of, for fun, for his own enjoyment, was playing Super Mario 64 120 star on Virtual Console. And he had been pacing some very good runs that were faster than the 144 of Siglemic. Now you have to keep in mind, Virtual Console in 120 star in Super Mario 64 saved something like 2.5 minutes in time, just in terms of the loading zones in and out of each star and each world and faster text and who knows, all these kind of typical things that one associates with a faster computer. And that's frankly what the Wii is. The robust Wii is a faster computer than the old N64, believe it or not. And so there was this tension in the air that like, what if Hayasin breaks Siglemic's time even with the faster console? Like, what will this mean for speedrunning? And lo and behold, one night in August 2013, Hayasin is on the run. And the speedrun community was so closely knit at that time that when like someone was on the run, everybody knew about it. People had Speedruns Live as their homepage when they would go log on to the internet, if you remember those days. And so you would click on it and you would see, oh, looks like this run is in progress. And immediately get a little window pop up of what run was playing and check in on dozens of runs at once and see if anyone was on a world record pace. And people would message their friends about it, say, oh, this guy's on a run, this guy's on a run. And these sorts of streams would blow up to thousands and thousands of viewers, which is not really something that still happens today. And it was kind of this magical moment that you would encounter. And people started tuning into this Hayasin run, Virtual Console, on pace to get a very low time. Everyone was on the edge of their seat. And Hayasin clocks in with 1:43.37. The first player in any capacity to get a 120 star time of under 1:44. Something Siglemic had been sort of on this journey to do for months in front of the speedrun community to his thousands and thousands of viewers. And he was sort of beaten to the punch by Hayasin, this relatively unknown fella playing the wrong version of the game. What would this mean? Would everyone would this be the final straw to abandon the N64 versions of the game and, only play Virtual Console and emulator from here on out? Or what would this mean for just the community at large? Now, at the time, there was no Discord yet. There was an IRC chat for various speedrun communities, though this was kind of strangely monitored, and there were some unusual people who would log every single thing posted. I mean, I guess that's not too different from Discord this day, but, anyways. So people took to Hayasin's chat room. You remember there was thousands of people watching, and just argued about the merits of keeping Super Mario 64 speedrunning to be N64 only versus Virtual Console, and even with the legitimacy of the run. And this argument went on, I vividly remember, like 4 or 5 hours after the stream and after the run was achieved. People were still in Hayasin's offline chat, just discussing and debating it. And it was quite a firestorm, quite a frenzy, a bit of a flame war. Now, not to say anything really productive ended up happening, but it put the game in this sort of limbo moment of like, which direction are we going to go with the game? Are we going to accept that this 143 is the new world record by Hayasin? Or are we going to always kind of keep this as a separate side category with an asterisk? We know it's faster, but kind of truly respect what's done on N64 as the main true category. And this discussion, frankly could rave on to this very day, and it has shown its head here and there, but it was quashed only a couple of days later. Out of nowhere, a stream arises, a very fresh stream, on Twitch TV /BasedEarnGod 333221. The stream starts up, And it is someone else, perhaps, attempting Super Mario 64 120 star speedruns on Virtual Console. Now, the stream was sort of left intentionally to be not of the perfect quality to prove a speedrun. The color grading, there's something done with the saturation to make the colors wonky. Sometimes they're correct, sometimes not. It's almost as if it's lightly strobing through a color spectrum. And there's this unbelievable music playing on the stream. The speedrunners listening to the soundtrack of, well, something early gamers at the time would love, sort of skate punk pop sounds of the one and only Angels and Airwaves, and then Blink 182. And so if you watch this speedrun, and I've never sat down and watched the whole thing, but you're almost treated to this re-listen of these wonderful musical albums of the time. And this run progresses and progresses, and it's now on pace to beat the 143 of Hyacinth. And as the runner collects the final star, it's playing from the Blink 182 album, Enema of the State, Adam's Song, set to this saturated footage, collects the final star, 143.22, a new world record in Mario 64 120 star. And as the credits go to roll, it goes on to the next track, which is, of course, All the Small Things. And it's just this surreal moment to see this experience of some speedrunner on some new alt account getting this new record on Virtual Console. As it turns out, and it's never been, officially quoted and proven in a, verified peer-reviewed paper, but it's widely accepted that this was Siglemic doing this on an alt account on Virtual Console, kind of just to prove a point that the Hyacinth run, was 30 seconds faster than his 144.01 on N64. And Siglemic, with the advantage of the Virtual Console and faster loading times, could quite easily beat even this. And frankly, this run kind of trivialized Virtual Console speedrunning on Super Mario 64. And it was done in such this sort of pop punk way, fitting to this era. I know the music was from the early 2000s and this was now 2013, but the way these eras blend together. And Siglemic himself is this very kind of punk character in speedrunning, this true legend who was kind of before his time, kind of not, and was such a pioneer in the games, and then has been mostly away from the community in the years since. And I think this trivialization of this run by kind of caking a new Virtual Console world record set to this music, set to that coloration pattern, kind of, not that it wouldn't have happened anyway, but took things a step further and sort of saying look, N64 is going to be the main way we speedrun Super Mario 64. The Virtual Console players, they can do it if they want, but N64 is the main way. And over the years, we do see now that trend to continue to be the case. 135 is the world record on N64, and I just looked and the Virtual Console record's 139, even though a run of 135 pace would give you, easily a 140, a 134 or 133. You'd save a little bit of extra time there. But because the top runners know to play N64, we don't see that case repeating. And it would actually be a very interesting thing to see, echoes of the past. If a new runner did go out there and get something like 134 on Virtual Console, that'd be quite a remarkable thing to see. But we haven't seen it. And I think this sort of story of this amazing Hyacinth run, frankly, that really was a time and place to be in the speedrun community. The sort of curiosity and controversy that unfolded, and then Siglemic or based Earn God easily beating it, was truly one of the most remarkable and curious moments in the history of speedrunning. Next up, I want to talk about a story from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. That's how I pronounce it with my Canadian accent, so I apologize, and sometimes I flip-flop, but anyways, here we go. So Ocarina of Time speedrunning was a very interesting thing, and I remember in the early 2000s watching some of the runs unfold on Speed Demo's archive, checking in to see this legendary, almost 5-hour run of TSA, and then it was beaten by Pokey down to, an hour and some change later. But Speed Demo's archive had some unusual rules. in which like they didn't want you to pause warp, so like save and quit and reset, and then you warp to a new spot in a temple or out throughout Hyrule. They had very, rules for their own time that were sort of these catch-all umbrella rules. And so if you wanted to submit your run to Speed Demo's archive, which was really the only place you could at that time, the only place that was capable of hosting speedrun videos to a large extent, you had to follow their sort of unusual rules. So the actual world record progression of Ocarina of Time any percent was this sort of niche and unusual thing back then. Thankfully, there's this really well-kept chart, a Google sheet out there that tracks this world record progression throughout time. And if we look into this 2011-2012 era, we find some curiosities. One that I find so incredible, and I feel like no one's really discussed this, maybe that's for the best, is this run back towards the tail end of what we call the RBA, or Reverse Bottle Adventure era, by a speedrunner by the name of Zakio. Now, the Reverse Bottle Adventure was this sort of middle period of speedrunning the game, and foundational tricks in terms of randomizer and all these stuff these days, where you would collect a bunch of items and do all sorts of glitches, and then by sort of progressing with the Big Goron sword trading sequence, you could write different objects to your memory, including the medallions that cause you to progress through the game. And this was the fastest way to beat the game for many, many years in these foundational era of speedrunning. And we see some familiar names back then setting the world record, like ZFG was actively involved, and Pokey had this remarkable run on SDA, and I love that era for sure. But a name we see on this world record progression chart is that of Zakio. And there's this run, and if you click on it, it's hosted on YouTube, it's been mirrored from years ago, and the description reads something like, many people thought this run was spliced due to amazing RNG, or good luck at points. And it's so incredible, there's this one comment on the video by actually Cosmic D from many years ago, another YouTube creator and speedrunner, a legend into his own right. And he just writes on the video 2 timestamps. And I'll actually play a clip of those 2 timestamps here.
Alright, so here is the luck manipulation. It's insane. The first 2 bushes I get 10 bombs from. The first 2 bushes. And then the second 2, I get 5 from each. So there, first, second, 10 rubies, 5 rubies, 10 rubies. That is just freaking insane. And as you can see, I get so confused that I forget to pick up the last bush. This is just insane because, okay, I have 2 hearts and I want a heart and I want a bomb drop. And then I get a heart and a bomb drop and it is placed right in front of me.
And Ocarina of Time runners at the time thought, is he kind of playing it up? Is he hamming it up? Maybe he did get that lucky, but he got very, very lucky to get those drops, just the drops he needed from these shrubs. What are the odds? Is this run spliced? And nobody ever knows to this day. And the way you would do it is, when the game is fading in or out of an area and fades to black, you would basically repeat that segment over and over until it went as well as you wanted, and then progress with the run that way. You'd have to assemble it, replay it in a media player, put the timer on screen. So, it is quite a process, and I know that, even someone like Carl Jobst has very well put it, in that you need to actually be very good at a game in order to then splice a world record. It doesn't make a nobody win, it makes a very good player get that extra little edge. And, this is a very old run. And to this day, no one's been able to prove if it's spliced or not. And it sort of exists in this weird purgatory of Ocarina of Time speedrun history. Even on that Google Sheet document, there's a little piece that says, ZFG here with this time would have the world record in this progression if Zakio's run was indeed spliced. And we see Zakio appear once more a little bit later, and there's no video that's remaining. It's lost media, unfortunately. So no one will ever know. And look, do I really care if this run is fake? One Ocarina of Time record that stood for a few days back in 2011? Not really. Nor do I care to levy any sort of accusations here. but I'm simply pondering the same things that those who have looked at this progression sheet have pondered themselves and other speedrunners have pondered indeed. It's a very curious thing to see there, and I think it's kind of every game almost like needs it in the deepest lore. You know, every sport has these controversial moments or a blown call or someone who maybe used performance enhancing substances or something like that. And the fact that it's just here on this innocuous sheet for a few days, I find it amazing, and maybe we'll never know the truth, and that's truly remarkable. Now, not to be outdone in a different manner of sort of controversy and curiosity, this sort of era of Ocarina of Time speedrunning was eventually supplanted, you know, the whole reverse model adventure thing, with the advent of wrong warping. And so in early 2012, they discovered actually that through the process of reverse ball adventure, you could eventually get the item Furore's Wind on your B button. And this is just the most insane era of Ocarina of Time speedrunning, I think, and I'm surprised it doesn't get discussed more. And so the game went from this sort of magical process of somewhat playing through it correctly and doing a bit of the trading sequence and writing items to your memory and defeating Ganon, to this point where you could get Furore's Wind on B, go into Dodongo's Cavern, and wrong warp into the credits. And this was a bit controversial in its own right because a lot of people felt like, was this truly beating the game? And these are conversations we've had through speedrun history, you know, for the ages now. You know, is that really beating the game? Is wrong warping, is arbitrary code execution beating the game? But thankfully, this sort of wrong warping era, you know, it was very short-lived, and only 2 players ever actually achieved the world record with it, ZFG and the one and only Narcissa Wright, believe it or not. So that's certainly a very curious era unto itself. But once people started learning about wrong warping and digging into the code, eventually they learned the Ganondorf wrong warp, where you warp from the Deku Tree to Ganon's castle, which in my opinion is like the most beautiful, the most perfect way that one could possibly beat a game. The fact that it happens in like the greatest game of all time, I want to go out there and say like it proves God's existence, you know what I mean? It's one of these things that's like too perfect for this world. And so that was the era of Ocarina of Time speedrunning that lasted for a good handful of years there until things like arbitrary code execution and whatnot were discovered and the game progressed from there. But these sorts of oddities that happened in 2011 and 2012 fascinate me to no end, and I just love that era of, you know, the Zakio run and the Furore's Wind on B era. Truly remarkable speedrun moments that I go back to and ponder many nights. And the last run I want to discuss today is the controversial run in GoldenEye that there has been an update to, and that is of Frigate 21 Agent by Rebecca Smiths, or Mirror Mage, Phil B. You know, this was a very unusual saga that culminated in December 2023, although it actually took place well before then. So Mirror Mage, you know, I guess he decided that he wanted to pull a big epic troll on the community. And so there was a known strategy on Frigate where if you learned the 2.3 control style, which is like the most awkward 2-controller control style one could possibly learn. I don't even know exactly how it's played because I haven't even barely tried it, but it's like you use various C buttons and D-pads and control sticks to move all at one. You know, you almost need to be an octopus to master this playstyle. But Mirror Mage decided he would do just that. And over the course of like 2 or 3 years, he learned how to play Frigate Agent with the 2.3 control style. The advantage this has is because with all 2.x control styles, you can shoot in the opening cutscene, but with 2.3, you can actually change the aim a little bit. And you can release one of the hostages in the cutscene. Then you have to wait out the correct one of the game's several cutscenes. Then you have to go through and play awkwardly with this control style, release another hostage, pause. At that point, you can take off the tracker bug, it's needed, but you can then change to a more natural control style and finish level there. But you're already halfway through it. Just so awkward to play, so challenging. But Phil decided he would not only master this and be the only person who's mastered it thus far in order to maybe get Frigate Agent 21, but when he would do it, he would build a fake profile of someone named Rebecca Smiths. Why? Maybe for fun, maybe for the lol. And if you grew up on the internet, I mean, I think that's an understandable reason why some people do things. Well, lo and behold, it's December 2023, and Phil pulls this off and posts this record to the GoldenEye rankings via Lake.net as a new player named Rebecca Smiths. For some reason, this put everyone into an immense frenzy, especially the people who were moderating and administrating the community at the time. You know, why this is, I don't exactly know. You think back to the first story I told tonight of Siglemic playing as based Earn God. This was like celebrated and remarked upon, yet, you know, Phil playing as Rebecca Smiths was frowned upon and created this sort of mass hysteria in the community, to the point they removed the time and froze Phil's rankings page indefinitely, or maybe it might have been for 2 years, it might have been indefinitely, and some people were pushing for a ban. And believe it or not, the people responsible in the elite community for moderating and administrating at the time were so mad about this, and that they couldn't quite nuke Phil from orbit, they actually tried to ban me and Perfect Ace for, you know, perceived past malfeasance or whatever it may be. And it was truly an insane moment in the game's history. And it almost seemed like, will the community finally crack and sever forever? Like, this could be unbelievable. Now, sort of the main person behind this, pushing for this ban of Phil and myself and Ace, eventually, I won't even name them because it is what it is, it's in the past now, but they were recalled from the position on the Elite Council, sort of the governing body, by like an overwhelming vote. And, you know, this sort of began to restore some sanity to the community. It was like the pendulum had swung too far one way. And so most of the people said, like, this is too much. You know, we understand Phil's Frigate time was performed under some controversial, you know, backdrop or what have you, but this is too far to just kind of go on this massive rampage and want to ban, you know, some of the, you know, all-time influential players from the community. This is ridiculous. And slowly but surely, senses started to get restored to the community. But the Frigate 21 was still removed from the rankings. Now, let me tell you this. There is another sort of detail to the Frigate 21 that I think, you know, I certainly forgot for a while, but it's actually the first Frigate 21 performed by Phil as Rebecca Smiths didn't meet the modern proof standards because there was too much ghosting, what we call ghosting, when there's sort of this weird interlacing and some of the frames blend together. It happens when you're recording at the wrong frame rate. Now, we have seen runs get sort of one-time accepted through even with ghosting. Like the Runway 21 of Eric Berg is on the rankings despite being ghosted. It was seen as too significant to sort of deny and just sort of like, listen, don't do it again. We'll take this for now. But Phil got the first Frigate 21, lots of ghosting, and so that was kind of further pretext to remove it from the rankings. Like, he kind of did this epic troll and it was ghosted. But then a few days later, he got another Frigate 21 that met the proof standards. The thing is, Frigate is a very luck-dependent level, and so what by some people, in some measures, was seen as like further proving that he got the time, others thought like he got way too lucky. There's no way he could have done this twice in a few days to get Frigate 21 completed. You have to have the hostages choose their best escape point, and it's a pretty uncommon thing. Objectively looking at it, it's not that uncommon. You know, Phil was the only person to master 2.3 control style. The first hostage, he has to pick his best 1 in 7 escape points. And once you've done that, the second has to pick his best 1 out of 6. So the odds are only 1 in 42. And like, you could totally get this in a few days of playing, especially if you were a master with this control style and regularly freeing that first hostage, and especially like locking in when he does complete, because he completes very, very quickly into the stage. And so I think the run is legit. I do think that Phil got this twice as Rebecca Smiths. Now that the game is, you know, so many years into it and so close to hitting that 1:10:00 or 1:09:59 minute barrier on the total time, the moderators decided, like, we have to reinstate this time because it would be way too unusual and way too controversial if we get to like 1:10 flat on the overall total time of the game and the Frigate 21 isn't ranked, even though it was probably achieved legitimately. And so after 2 years of this, the temperature in the community has cooled to a point where the moderator said, we're reinstating this time, and that's been new in the past few days. That's a very new thing. Frigate 21 is on the rankings, as well as one or two of Phil's other times that he achieved, as Rebecca Smith's. And the total time of the game now stands at 1:10:03. So 4 more seconds are needed to cut from the game to hit this amazing barrier that's going to be, the biggest thing in GoldenEye speedrunning history, perhaps. I've mentioned a few times there's this massive bounty out there for any second cut from the game down to 109.59. A bunch of community members and players have put money out there, and now it's like $800 US per second. So if someone was to go out there and get, Aztec 00129 or Surface 200114 right now, they would get like $3,200 US for achieving this world record, which is, I think, the highest amount that's ever been staked for a GoldenEye time. And that's the story, the refresher of the Rebecca Smith's Frigate 21 and sort of where it's put the community now on the precipice of breaking this incredible barrier in GoldenEye history. So there, my friends, were 3 stories of speedrun controversies and curiosities by the fire. I hope you enjoyed and it kept you warm and cozy on this fine night. A huge thanks to the channel members and the Patreon supporters for all of your support. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream or video. Good night.